The post office strike is causing unimaginable chaos in many people's lives. Just have a look at this tweet. I can imagine there are thousands of kids who think they've applied for tertiary education but actually haven't because of the post office strike. There was a tweet by MaMtshali. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and the post office strike is still continuing. I'm joined this evening by Virginia Stirk, who's the head of postgraduate admissions and student enrolment centre at Wits University, and Chris Yelland, the managing director of EE Publishers, to discuss the consequences of the very tedious post office strike. You want every post office closed down and turned into an aquarium, preferably with the people who work there still inside, Chris Yelland.
We're not against the post office. We do think, though, there should be alternatives to the post office. So if they can continue and provide a service at an economical price, a sustainable way, of course they should compete, just like everybody else has to compete. But at the moment they are dysfunctional, and we need alternatives.
Well, your problem is that you publish a physical magazine, a paper magazine that you would like to get to subscribers of your magazine because they've paid you money up front, possibly a year in advance, and it's your job to make sure that they get the copies. Have you managed to get those copies through?
No.
So you're in breach of your contract then, or do you have a clause that says if the post office people are being idiots, it's not our fault?
That's right. We have a clause in our terms and conditions of contract for advertisers that basically says that our job is to deliver it to the post office, and that delays in postal deliveries should not affect payments.
That's fine in months 1, 2 and 3, but eventually advertisers go, well, you can't get it through that bottleneck. We can't keep throwing money into advertising in this publication, and it threatens the sustainability then of a business which is how old, 30 years old?
Well, 20.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a serious problem for magazine publishers, but equally serious problems for many activities in South Africa. And I'm really surprised how passive, for example, the business sector in South Africa is about the post office. We should be seeing activist business. We should be seeing South African Chamber of Commerce of Industry and all the different business associations standing up and becoming activists. We're not seeing that. But anyway, a small group of us publishers are taking action. We're lodging a formal complaint with ICASA as a precursor, as a first step to a possible class action.
And what do you hope to achieve with the class action like that?
Well, we're suffering damages, financial damages, delayed payments, order cancellations, subscription cancellations. It has a serious impact on our business, and we're suffering financial damage. And really the post office needs to get a message, a strong message.
I'm sorry, but is there anybody left to take the message? And that's the problem, isn't there? I mean, Virginia, here you sit, it is November. Every year there are 5,000 or 6,000 young people who would like to broaden their minds and get an experience of a university education. In the same way as students at UNISA have struggled to get their assignments through to UNISA for marking and to graduate. How does anybody register for a university? I remember a while back when, long after Chris, of course, went to university, I had to fill in forms on a piece of paper, stick them in an envelope, lick a stamp before self-adhesive stamps, and put it in the post, and I was then invited to a university to go and do my studies. Those days are past, clearly.
Bruce, they have. The university has grown substantially in terms of our technology in communicating with applicants. And for the last number of years, we've encouraged applicants to start applying online. All our communication currently is done electronic, via email to applicants, as well as through the post. And obviously at the moment that, the post is not working, but applicants are still communicating with the university because they are receiving our letters electronically. They are able to upload documents through the functionality we have on the applications portal and the self-service portal.
That process was inevitable. It was going to happen.
Yes.
At some point in the next 10 years it was going to happen.
Yes.
Post office strikes, however, I'm sure light a fire under IT departments at universities and say, okay guys, we have a crisis, let's get this going. And students probably welcome it, because especially with mobile devices.
We have actually welcomed it, Bruce. We've seen an increase of about 10% from the number of online applications we received last year versus this year. And we've seen an increase of about 6,000 overall applications that the university has received. So we really, where we are at the moment, we don't really feel that the post office has stopped us in our tracks in terms of our admissions for 2015. And certainly the postgraduate students, you know, they are working students, they don't have the time to come and visit us and queue to submit an application. So that technology has allowed us to continue business as usual.
But you sped up the use of the technology courtesy of the unreliability of the system.
Yes, we have.
And that's another death knell then to the sustainability of this post office that you want to see, Chris Yelland. You want the post office to have a sustainable business, but we've had Sasol and Zalo sitting in that chair. We've had other companies, for example, PPC had to go to court, like Sasol and Zalo had to get special permission for their 8th of December shareholders meeting to tell people electronically, because the Companies Act requires people to receive a piece of paper. That's no longer going to be required as people lobby for changes to the Companies Act. The post office becomes less and less relevant. Unless it comes back from this brink, it may very well be dead.
You know, you asked, is anybody listening at the post office? Well, I certainly hope there's somebody listening at ICASA, because ICASA is the regulatory authority that oversees the post office's compliance with its license conditions, and they have the power to grant other licenses. And we are going to be lodging a formal complaint with ICASA. Our attorneys are doing it. It's at the moment being reviewed by the advocate. It has to be submitted formally, and we're asking ICASA to review the situation, to look at our complaint, and to take sanction against the post office, and to look at alternatives, because in an economy of the kind of South Africa is, we need a functional postal service. I do know that there's a move to electronic media communications in many fields, including publishing.
Yes,
we publish all our magazines online, but there is also a need for paper magazines, and we hope that the Minister is listening, we hope that ICASA is listening, and we hope that alternatives get put in place for customers.
We can sit here in our lofty privilege and go, well, we've got email. I can read his magazine online. I can receive a PDF copy of the magazine. I can flick through it. I can store it and read it at my leisure. The only place I can't read it is when I'm either taking off in an aeroplane or landing, but that's okay. But there are millions of South Africans
that don't have internet access.
Who don't have internet access, who don't have electricity, who require the postal service to deliver some very, very basic services. And that's what's happening here, is the poor are being further marginalized. Are you seeing that from poorer communities, applications coming through, Virginia?
Bruce, we've seen a number of our rural applicants contacting the university telephonically, and where they've made contact with us within our normal application cycle, we've accommodated them. Often they've got a parent or an aunt or an uncle that is in a work environment, was able to download an application, fax it through to us, etc. So yes, we've tried to mitigate against that reality in order to ensure that those applicants are not marginalized.
But it comes down to the reality. The poor will be marginalised, and the wealthy will make another plan. I met a Cape Town entrepreneur just this week who's started an inner city delivery service, a courier service based on the Uber business model for parcels and packages and absolutely anything you need within the Cape Town city bowl, bringing it to Sandton for the greater Sandton area in the next couple of weeks. It's a direct response to the sort of problem. People make a plan.
Well, we are making a plan. We're going out to tender, and fortunately the delivery of periodicals is not covered by the Post Office's exclusive license. There is nothing to stop us from making arrangements with the companies that are currently delivering newspapers and periodicals and stuffing things into post boxes and throwing them over fences and delivering them into the post at the physical address of a company. And we're making arrangements to deliver to the physical addresses of our readers. It's going to be slightly more expensive, and we may not have full national coverage, but it'll cover more than 90% of our readership. But of course, we're a specialist publisher, and not every publisher has a readership that's restricted mainly to the metropolitan areas. But we are making a plan, and the Post Office is driving us to make this plan, and we need alternatives. I wish the Post Office well. No. But we need alternatives.
Absolutely right. And chances are you're never going to go back the same route as Sasol and Zala won't ever have to go back. PPC will never have to go back. Wits University, in terms of enrolment, never has to go back to archaically named snail mail.
Yes. Correct.
And that's the real problem. So they'll lose 90% of your revenues. You may still use them up as and when they're up and running once again. And inevitably, it leads to job cuts. And inevitably, it puts people on the street. And trade unions will have a lot to answer for.
Well, we spend, as a small publisher with 4 magazines, we spend 2.5 million rand a year with the post office.
On postage?
On postage. 2.5 million rand. I estimate that the magazine publishing industry spend something like 150 to 200 million rand a year with the post office. They're going to lose a major chunk of this business because this business is not protected by the post office license, and there's nothing to stop magazine publishers from making alternative arrangements, and that's what they have to do to survive. That's what we have to do.
So 2015 enrollments will be fine.
Yes.
What does a UNISA do, though? Well, I mean, that's an issue. It's not your problem, but what does a UNISA do when it comes to, it's a correspondence college, it's a correspondence university. It requires the efficient delivery and collection of manuscripts.
Bruce, I imagine that UNISA is going to be moving into the electronic arena as well, where I'm aware that students can already submit assignments electronically through their student portal, and I would imagine the process of returning those assignments to students through an electronic format will happen as well. I have no doubt.
It's an absolute shambles.
Yes.
It's a disgrace, and it's a tragedy because the very people who are standing up for their so-called rights in this process are the ones who are going to be ultimately prejudiced. I thank you for coming in. It's nice to see you both. Virginia Stirk is the head of postgraduate admissions for the Student Enrolment Centre at Wits University, taking us through some of the challenges they face, but also, well, the private sector finds a way around a crusty, rusty and disabled public sector. Chris Yelland, the managing director of EE Publishers, who with a couple of chums in the publishing industry, going to ICASA and saying to ICASA, you hand out the license, this isn't good enough, open the playing fields please, and soon may it happen. Thanks for watching. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Good night, and for goodness sake, end that strike, and if not, watch us on TV. It gets delivered straight into your home. You don't have to rely on the post office. Good night.